the QMS Auditor Transition Series, Module 4, IATF 16949 2016 Changes.
Let's start off first by looking at the evolution of the automotive quality management system standards. ISO 9001, 1987 came out, plus individual automotive customer specific standards. In 1994, we saw the formation of QS 9000 by Ford, GM, and Chrysler in North America. There was an update to QS 9000 in 1998. ISO TS 16949 2002 was published, and it became the first international automotive standard. December 14th, 2006, QS 9000 was dissolved. ISO TS 16949 2009 was then updated 3 years later. And in 2016, we saw the first release of IATF 16949, which will ultimately replace ISO TS 16949 in 2018. In this illustration, you see the QMS and the automotive QMS timeline. 9001 is on the top in black, and you see on the bottom of the timeline in blue and orange, that is automotive. You can see in 2015, 9001 2015 was released. The blue items in the bottom have been, this is QS 9000, each of those in blue have become obsolete, and then in the orange you see TS 1999 was replaced by 2002, and that was replaced with 2009. Now we're looking forward, 2017, 2018. In September 14th, 2018, the ISO 9001-2008 document is obsolete. That also marks the date that the ISO TS 16949-2009 standard becomes obsolete as well. October 1st, 2017 is the last date to be audited to ISO TS 16949. And then backing up just a few more months from that, October 3rd, 2016 was the first release of IATF 16949 2016. So some additional IATF resources that are available online can be found at iatf.org. There's a nice navigation bar to the left where you can find customer-specific requirements. You can find a lot of guidance documents on transitioning. You can purchase different publications, training, certifications, that sort of thing online there as well. Another thing that is fairly new is the IATF rules for the registrars. We've seen that called the Rules 5th edition, or Rules 5, that was published in November of 2016. So that has been updated on the website, and much to my dismay, they are now charging for the download of those rules. So if you are an AIAG or IATF member, I believe it's somewhere around $30 to $40 per download US. If you're a non-member, the cost is $150, and you have to use their electronic viewer. This is not a PDF that you're able to download locally, but you actually have to go to their website to view the document, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. But hey, they're the IATF, and they can charge you what you want, what they want, and what are you going to do about it? So unfortunately, there's some bad with the good. So use that IATF website as a resource, and as well as the North American representation, which is the AIAG website. (1.1) Scope, automotive supplemental. So we're getting into some of the setting of the stage for the IATF standard. And you see in the scope there, automotive related products, including products with embedded software. So that is the new scope of IATF 16949, including design and development, production, assembly, installation, service, and applicable to sites where manufacturing of customer specified production parts, service parts, and/or accessory parts occur. Terms and definitions. So there are 40 terms and definitions that show up in clause 3.1. We're not going to go through and take up a half an hour reviewing each of these, especially because they're published in the standard itself, which is good, unlike ISO 9001, where you have to actually go and purchase the additional 9,000 terms and definitions document. Some of the key terms and definitions are actually inside this document, so that is a positive. For $150 each, at least you get a section with the terms and definitions. So some of the terms and definitions you see here, you will see in italics font, and that indicates, you can see the note below. Italics indicates new term and or definition. So accessory part is a new term that has been defined there. APQP, or Advanced Product Quality Planning. We saw that in the IATF or the TS standard. Aftermarket part is also a new term. Authorization. Challenge master part. This is a new term, so this would be like, you could also call this the rabbit or the bad part during first article. Control plan, customer requirements, customer specific requirements. Design for assembly, or DFA, is new. Design for manufacturing, or DFM, is new, and I don't really understand this next one, but they have design for manufacturing and assembly, which basically says it's just a combination of the two above. I don't get it, but there you go. There's another definition for you. It's DFMA. We see design for Six Sigma, which is great. More proactive approach to Six Sigma versus the DMAIC approach. Design responsible organization. There's some further definition there, but it's not new. Error proofing, that's not new either. Escalation process is a new definition. Fault tree analysis, or FTA, that's new. Laboratory scope, manufacturing, those three have been in there. So has manufacturing feasibility. Manufacturing services is new. Multidisciplinary approach has been there. NTF, so no trouble found, also known as no fault found, is new. Outsourced processes has been there. Period overhaul is new. Predictive maintenance was there. Premium freight was there. Preventive maintenance was there. Product, so they've actually gone through the links of defining product, which is interesting, although it's not new. Production shutdown is new. Reaction plan, remote location, both of those have been in the standard for TS. Service part is new. Site was there. Specific character or special characteristic was there. Special status was there. Support function was there. Total productive maintenance is new. So not predictive maintenance, but productive maintenance. TPM, but the P is productive, not predictive or preventive, as we've seen in the past. Trade-off curves is new. So is trade-off process. So that's a rundown of the terms and definitions in 3.1 in the standard. Each of those are broken down with a clear definition in the standard, so go check that out and see the italicized terms and definitions for those that should jump out and be studied as they are new. Before we jump into the specifics in IATF 16949 with regard to significant changes, I wanted to just first summarize a dozen or so significant changes that kind of bubble to the top of my list as changes that need to be highlighted and need special attention. So the first one is that we see in Clause 4 under context of the organization. This is product safety. The next one is under Clause 5. This is corporate responsibility and process ownership. So we see that use of process owners as a role within the maintenance and improvement of the QMS. Clause 6, we see risk analysis and also an expanded section and some expanded controls related to contingency planning. So contingency planning has been in TS 16949, but is expanded quite a bit in Clause 6. Clause 7, we see additional requirements for internal auditor competencies. So they're really focused heavily on bulking up the auditing program, both in-house and second party, and you'll see that first surface in the support side of things under 7.2. Also within the documentation or document and information section in 7.5, you'll see that the quality manual that was taken out of ISO 9001 2015 is added back by the automotive folks in that clause. A significant change there for Clause 7. Clause 8, development of products with embedded software. So 8.3, you're really focusing on embedded software as a part of the product and controls within vehicles and their components. 8.4 is where we see quite a bit of additional requirements applied to supplier selection and development, and also second-party audits. So very specifically, there's an entire section on second-party audits. 8.5, which is where production and service provision pops up here. We have standard work and job setup. We also see total productive maintenance coming in, and it's rather expansive. Identification and traceability has several more requirements as well. Temporary process change has an entire section dedicated to it, which is new. Nonconformities, how to handle nonconformities, specifically nonconforming product instead of just nonconforming output. But the automotive QMS comes along and says we really need to pay particular attention to those nonconforming products or suspect products and making sure we've got good controls there. So those are some key changes. In Clause 9, we see some key changes related to a more comprehensive evaluation of customer satisfaction. We see in 9.2 an expanded set of criteria for your internal auditing program. So QMS and manufacturing process audits have quite a bit of additional items under those two sections. 9.3 we see in management review. So specifically management review inputs. We actually have on the automotive side twice as many management review input requirements as we have over on the ISO 9001 side. So 9001 we see 11 inputs as a requirement, and on the IATF side we see 22 inputs that are required for management review. So big changes there. Finally, in Clause 10, we see some significant changes in problem solving and handling of warranty claims. And finally, in 10.3, the continual improvement process and the requirements there for documenting those continual improvement processes to make them a bit more formal. So that's the rundown of a dozen or so top significant changes associated with the IATF 16949 2016 release, and we will go through each of these clause by clause in a bit more detail now. So let's start with context of the organization, clause 4. Again, each of these sections will be in addition to what we're seeing in the last module, which is new or substantial updates to these clauses as they relate to just the automotive add-on to the standard. So 4.4, 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, no real significant updates there in addition to the 9001 standard changes, but we do see at clause 4.4, 4412, we have to have a documented process that's required for product safety, and that documented process is very, very extensive. This is the first time we see product safety really taken to this level of details. Identification of the statutory and regulatory requirements, how you go about identifying those and keeping track of those requirements, customer notification of any product safety issues, special approvals for design, failure mode, and effects analysis, or DFMEA, the identification of product safety-related characteristics and how they need to flow throughout your documentation, identification of controls at the point of manufacture, special approval of control plans and PFMEAs that have product safety items in them. And to continue on here, we have documented process required for product safety, including reaction plans. So what are the reaction plans associated with product safety? What are the responsibilities, the escalation process, and information flow related to product safety? Training identification for the organization or for the customer if the customer might encounter some product safety, let's say for use or assembly. Changes to products or processes that might impact product safety. Transfer of requirements, let's say from one supplier to the next or from your operation to an outside external service provider. Product traceability by manufactured lot, so being able to decipher one lot from the next and quarantine any issues that might be related to product safety recalls. Lessons learned from new product introduction. So those are the items that are now required as a part of a very comprehensive and deliberate product safety focus, which I think is a great thing. Clause 5, leadership. So 5111, we see something that is new, and that's corporate responsibility. This is kind of an overlap of ISO 26001, which is social responsibility, but we've got corporate responsibility here. We need to define and implement a corporate responsibility policy or policies for anti-bribery, employee code of conduct, and an ethics escalation policy. That's a mouthful. Ethics escalation policy, or also known as a whistleblowing policy. So this is added in as a part of leadership and commitment clause. We also see as a part of leadership and commitment the process owners, so identifying process owners who are responsible for managing processes and their related outputs. Those process owners need to understand their roles in the quality management system. They need to be competent to perform their roles, and that is a new requirement for process ownership and the role of a process owner, which I think is a great addition as well. Clause 6, planning. So in Clause 6, planning, we see an expanded risk analysis, not just risk-based thinking, but risk analysis in 6121. So their minimum requirements, including lessons learned from product recalls, field returns and repairs, complaints, scrap, rework. And the idea there is basically, looking at lessons learned, analyzing risk, analyzing the trends from the past, and applying those trends and those potential risks in a forward view to prevent risk, or at least manage or mitigate risk at the planning level in 6.1. So 6.2.2, we see preventive action. It's added back into the automotive QMS. Preventive action is not in the ISO 9001 standard, so it's added back into the mix here on the automotive side. (6.1.2.3) contingency plan. So there's an expansion from what we saw with contingency plans in TS, including the identification and evaluation of internal and external risk. So it could be your supply chain, could be a utility provider, temporary work, anything that's really outsourced, manufacturing process, infrastructure, equipment. And item B here, 6.1.2.3b, defined based on risk and customer impact. So how significant is the risk and what's the impact to the customer? I've seen some automotive suppliers that have already done kind of almost a mini FMEA or risk priority number ranking on their contingency plans for, say, business continuity planning or other kind of high-level global contingency planning, which is great. So they're actually already meeting this particular requirement if they're doing that. To continue here, continuity of supply in the event of key equipment failure, externally provided products, processes, and services. So again, key equipment internal, key equipment to your supplier or some other external provided product, process, or service. Recurring natural disasters such as hurricane, earthquake, fires based on your location. We see fire here. Utility interruptions, labor shortages or strikes, that sort of thing, and infrastructure disruption. So these are things that you need to be diligent about and look at in your supply chain as well as inward. So to continue on with 6.1.2.3 contingency planning D, supplemental notification process. We need to have that in order to the customer and any other interested party of the extent and the duration of the contingency. Periodic testing of the effectiveness of that contingency plan, disaster drill, fire drills, that sort of thing. Annual, and this is very specific here, annual at a minimum review and updating using a multidisciplinary team, including top management. So you really want to test these contingency plans to make sure that they work and you're well prepared, and that needs to be done at a minimum if you're in the IATF world. And then documented and retained revision history, including persons who authorize changes to these contingency plans. Finally, validation of conformity upon restart. So once you get back to normal operations, you need to validate conformity. It doesn't say of product. This could be product, process, or service upon restart of your normal operations. Clause 7 is support. So we see, thankfully here, and it's very interesting, we're out to 5 digits now with 7.1.5.2.1, which is a mouthful. We see calibration and verification records were added back into the automotive QMS after being very, very weak in the ISO 9001 clause here, which was monitoring and measurement resources and calling them suitable, and that was basically the extent of it. So it's nice to see that the controls are back on the automotive side here. Clause 7.2, specifically 7.2.3 internal auditor competency, we see quite a bit of new requirements here. First thing we see is minimum competency for quality management system manufacturing and product auditors, including an understanding of, and again it says minimum, automotive process approach for auditing, including risk-based thinking. So we have a slide or two or three in the next module looking at the process design and the automotive process approach from the IATF rules, so we'll get into that in more detail. But the idea here is looking more so at objectives and targets, starting with data, looking at those processes that have a greater impact on the customer, specifically looking at those processes where there might be high risk or you're not meeting the targets as intended. So we'll get into that in a little bit more detail here in a few slides. But applicable customer-specific requirements. So if there are customer-specific requirements related to the process or processes or area or manufacturing line or product that you're auditing, you need to be familiar with those applicable requirements from the customer. Also, and this just makes sense, any applicable 9001 and IATF requirements related to the audit scope. So if you're auditing a certain process, what are the underlying 9001 and automotive requirements related to that particular process that you're auditing? To continue with clause 7.2.3, internal auditor competency, we see at D, applicable manufacturing processes to be audited, including PFMEA and control plan. There's an asterisk by that. I'll get to that in just a second. Applicable core tools required that's related to the audit scope. So the idea there is any core tools, be it FMEA, control plan, the APQP, PPAP, so on and so forth, SPC, MSA. If there's an applicable overlap there or underlying requirements there with regard to the process or processes you're auditing, you need to be familiar with those core tools as well. Planning, conducting, reporting, and closing out findings. So really the PDCA cycle as it applies to the auditing process, your internal auditors need to be competent on those. So what does the asterisk mean up here at D? So 723D is actually, I don't quite understand this, but it's unique to second-party auditors, although in our opinion, it's a good idea for anyone that's auditing a manufacturing process or processes to be familiar with those manufacturing processes, and that would include the FMEAs, the process FMEAs, and the control plans that really govern the quality planning of that particular manufacturing process that you're auditing. So, but that particular item here is unique to the actual clause in the second party auditing or second party auditor competencies. It's not actually explicit in the internal auditor competency portion of the standard, which I find interesting. On to clause 7.5, 7511, QMS documentation. So the quality manual is added back into the automotive QMS at this particular point. We see the same thing over on the aerospace AS9100D standard, where they've added the quality manual back as a requirement for the documented information for a formal QMS. We've got a formal or format and structure flexibility. In fact, I just created a nice quality manual in the past week for a client that is a trifold brochure. So it doesn't have to be a big hunkin' binder. It could be a part of your sales and marketing material if that's what you choose to use it for. If there's a series of documents that's used, the list of documents comprising the quality manual must be maintained. So some sort of association list of documents, where what we saw in 9001, 2008, it said the required documented procedures or reference to them. So this is really kind of relevant back to that requirement in 9001, 2008, which actually isn't there anymore, but you see it here on the automotive side. The quality manual is to include the scope, including exclusion and detail or justification for anything that's excluded. Again, we don't see the words exclusion or exclude in the 9001 document, so we see it here on the automotive side. But what is the scope of your management system, your QMS? And it needs to be documented inside the quality manual. Again, documented processes or reference to them. QMS processes, sequence, and interactions, including control of external processes. Documentation here. A document, i.e. a matrix, indicating where customer-specific requirements are addressed. And again, there's a note saying the applicability matrix is encouraged. So I encourage the use of an applicability matrix in various parts of the organization, not only showing the overlap between customer-specific requirements and your internal processes, but also the overlap between your internal processes and standard requirements. Applicability matrix is a great tool, very simple and very useful for process owners. So next we'll jump into the do processes, which is under Clause 8, operation. Operation is made up of Clause 8.1 through 8.7. Not much difference in 8.1 and 8.2 as it relates to 9001, but design and development, as expected, certainly has some significant add-ons here on the automotive side. 8323 focuses on the development of products with embedded software. You must use a process for quality assurance for internally developed embedded software through assessment methodology that must be utilized to assess the development process, and there needs to be a record kept of the software development capability self-assessment. Software development must be included in the internal auditing program, and of course with that comes a competency requirement to be competent and savvy enough in software testing to understand what you are auditing. In 8.4 we see in control of externally provided processes, products, and services. So really the supplier side of things, you see this emergence again of the word supplier, which is great because I don't know about you, but I call suppliers suppliers. It's a very interesting and pivotal moment in American language, but I don't call them external providers and get kind of tripped up on that term. But you see at 8.4.1.2, specifically the selection process for suppliers, there needs to be a documented process for that includes an assessment of supplier risk, of product conformity, uninterrupted supply of product, and also what are the relevant quality and delivery performance indicators and requirements for those particular suppliers. And then that becomes an input into management review that we see here in a few minutes. 8.4C, so evaluation of the supplier's quality management system, a multidisciplinary decision making. Do decisions get made using a cross-functional team with your supplier, and that is to be a part of that selection process. Assessment of software development capabilities if applicable. And the standard offers other selection criteria that should be considered, but this is where you see should, recommendations, that sort of thing that are expanded, not so much the requirements specifically, but some should statements there under your supplier selection process. So the supplier QMS development. So unless authorized by the customer, the automotive product and service suppliers must develop, implement, and improve a formal QMS that is certified to ISO 9001 unless authorized by the customer. And ultimately, similar with TS 16949, the objective is to become, it says certified to, it doesn't say conforming to, but certified to IATF 16949. 8.4 continued, 8423, another part of QMS development as it relates to your supplier base. You need to apply the following sequence to achieving certification. So if your suppliers have not achieved certification to IATF 16949, these are the steps, and oddly enough, they're very descriptive, which I think is a bit strange. This section doesn't quite fit the rest of the standard. It's very, very descriptive and starts out with second party audits to 9001 to ensure compliance, and then the next step being certification by third party to 9001, then certification to 9001 plus any customer defined QMS requirements that you're applying either directly to your customer or to your supplier or coming as flow through through your customer. Then step 4D here is certification to 9001 plus compliance to IATF 16949 through, again, second party audit, and then finally certification to IATF. So you kind of see that sequence there. I guess this gives you a little bit more wiggle room, which is good if you're using a supplier and they have not fully developed their QMS through the certification process. This kind of gives you the roadmap there in working with those suppliers, assuming that your customer gives you that freedom to continue to use these suppliers that don't at least have 9001 certification. Interesting section. Here in 8.4, we see 84241, again, out 5 digits here. Second party audits. Supplier management must include second party audits. So you've got to go out and actually do audits of your suppliers. Those second party audits may include, I think it's interesting that they say may, so it's up to you to define, and you and your customer, what's adequate in terms of second party audits, but supplier risk assessment, supplier monitoring, supplier QMS development, product audits, process audits. Second party audits, you must document criteria for determining second party audits needed, including the type, frequency, and the scope. So criteria needs to be based on supplier risk, performance of their QMS, the product's safety and regulatory requirements for that supplier base, and their certification level. 8.5. So at 8512, we see standardized work, operator instructions, and visual standards documents that is a bit more prescriptive, and they need to have rules for operator safety. So not only do we see in clause 4 the requirements for product safety, but we also see the use of safety here as it pertains to operator safety within production or within the service provision. So those visual standards, operator instructions must be communicated to and understood by, which I think this is great, not just communicated and posted in the workplace, but understood by employees that are responsible for performing the work. They also need to be legible, in a language or languages understood by personnel responsible to follow them. To me, that just seems to be, a pretty straightforward, common sense approach. But hey, there's a reason that that's in there, and in fact, I've seen several companies that the majority of the folks in a certain area will speak Spanish or Portuguese or some sort of Mandarin language, and yet the instructions are only available in English. So this particular clause will help to mitigate that potential risk of not necessarily understanding the instructions that are posted. And then accessible at work area or areas. 8513, we see verification of job setups, and operations must verify job setup, for example, initial run, during a material changeover, job change, requiring a new setup. But the idea here is that you do a bit of a job setup verification, first piece article, first run, rabbit run, master part run, making sure that the good and bad signals are working appropriately, and then you can go full speed ahead with production or service. B here, maintain documented information for setup personnel. So the idea here is you need to keep up and have a documented procedure, standard work instruction, some sort of documented information for those folks that are responsible for setting up the production or the service provision there. Also, use of statistical methods of verification where applicable. So when you can use statistical methods to verify proper setup, you should do so. I like this, which is, it was a note on TS 16949. Now it's a requirement, and that is a first off and last off part validation, so that if your last part compared to your first part shows that you've gone out of control or out of spec, you can at least more easily quarantine any known or suspect material during that run and take action as appropriate for containing and correcting that issue. And F is retain records of process and product approval and first off, last off part validation. So we want to see a record there kept for that verification of the job setup and first piece, last piece verification. 8515, this is total productive maintenance. So you must develop, implement, maintain, and have a documented practice, including the following at a minimum. So number one here, or A, is identification of process equipment that's necessary to produce conforming product at the required volume. So it's not good enough to just be able to produce product, but what is the pull schedule? What is the tack time? What is the material flow as it is being pulled by the customer, and can your equipment handle that volume or that count? B, availability of replacement parts. So you should have key replacement part inventory that's adequate to ensure that your equipment is not only suitable but available as needed should a part of that equipment need to be replaced. Provision of resources for machine, equipment, and facility maintenance. So what resources are needed? What do you need? And that should be documented to make sure you have adequate resources for machine, equipment, and facility maintenance. Packaging and preservation requirements associated with equipment, tool, and gauging. Applicable customer-specific requirements. Documented objectives such as OEE, mean time between failure, MTTR, and these objectives are now required as inputs into management review. G, regular review of maintenance, the maintenance plan, objectives, and documented corrective actions. So you really have almost like a miniature miniature management review amongst the productive maintenance team members to look at what's going right with the maintenance plan. Are we meeting our objectives? When we're not, are we taking action and documenting that action? And use of preventive maintenance methods when possible. And we go on. Use of predictive maintenance methods as applicable, and periodic overhaul of equipment, of the machines, of facilities as needed. 8.5 continues with a significant change in 8521, which is identification and traceability. So traceability to support clear start and stop points, so you can again quarantine and know when a certain batch has started and stopped. You conduct analysis of traceability requirements, including developing and documenting traceability plans. So there's this use of this terminology, traceability plans, that comes up here. And those plans need to enable identification of nonconformities or suspect product, enable segregation of nonconformities or suspect product, and ensures the ability to meet response time requirements. Traceability plans that ensure record retention needed to meet response time requirements, ensure serialization, identification of individual products where required by the customer or any regulatory requirements, and ensuring that the traceability plans, the identification traceability requirements are extended to supplied products with safety and regulatory characteristics connected to those things that are supplied. 85611, temporary change of process controls. So you have to identify, document, and maintain a list of primary process controls, approve backup and alternative control methods, and then have a documented process for use of that alternative or alternate control method, such as in your FMEA or in your control plan. Alternative control method must include requirement for the customer approval prior to shipment of the product. And these alternative methods have to be documented in standard work and reviewed, it says, daily at a minimum, with a goal to returning back to the original process in the control plan. And typically that's your original process that was signed off during your PPAP. And maintain traceability of all products produced during that alternative process. So it's easy to identify which of those were used in that temporary change or temporary process. Clause 8.7, control of non-conforming output. So in 8.7.1.2, we have control of non-conforming product, customer specified process. So this one's saying that if there is a customer specified process for controlling non-conforming products, then you have to comply with that process. Pretty simple. 8713, control of suspect product. You have to ensure that unidentified or suspect status products are classified and controlled as non-conforming. Appropriate manufacturing personnel receive training for containment of suspect and non-conforming products. So they know in manufacturing, they've been trained on how to properly contain and prevent unintended use of that bad product. So now we're at the check phase, performance evaluation. 9.1.2.1, customer satisfaction supplemental. So these are additional supplemental means of evaluating customer satisfaction. So customer satisfaction monitoring via continual evaluation of internal and external performance indicators based on the following: delivered part quality performance, customer disruptions, field returns, recalls, and warranty where applicable, delivery scheduled performance, including incidents of premium freight, which is unintended shipping expenses, customer notifications related to quality or delivery issues, including any special status, and then monitoring to include customer requirements for process efficiency. So those are some supplemental customer satisfaction add-ons from the automotive industry. Clause 9.2, specifically 9221, internal audit program. Quite a few add-ons here. You have to have a documented internal audit process, including an audit program that covers QMS, manufacturing process, and product audits, so nothing really new there. But this includes auditing of software development, capability assessments, where the organization is responsible for software development. So if software development is within the scope of your QMS, there's quite a bit of competency bulking up that you have to do as it relates to this new release of the automotive standard. Your audit frequency needs to be based on occurrences of process changes, internal and external nonconformities, customer complaints, and your audit program effectiveness needs to be reviewed as a part of management review. So not just the results of audits, but the audit program effectiveness, which is different. That means, how are you achieving the desired result that you want of your auditing program? And that is one of the inputs to management review now. QMS audits in 9222. So all QMS processes need to be audited over a 3-year calendar period according to an annual program. So this is where you see a 1-year plan required, and each of the processes now have to be audited during that 3-year period. Of course, it's not saying just once every 3 years, but it being on a 3-year calendar period. Use of the process approach to verify compliance to IATF 16949 requirements, and sampling of effective implementation of customer-specific QMS requirements needing to be included in the audit program. So I really like this. It's going to be a very difficult requirement to comply with, but it's nice to finally see that customer-specific requirements very explicitly are a part of the QMS auditing requirements. So in years past, I've seen many companies that shake their head, yes, that they can comply with customer-specific QMS requirements, but don't necessarily have a good organized system for actually keeping track of what they're signing up to. So now that gets pulled in as a part of the QMS auditing process. Requirements in 9.2.2.3, manufacturing process audit. So all manufacturing processes, similar to all QMS processes, need to be audited over a 3-year calendar period. Each audit plan shall include audits of all shifts of manufacturing, including sampling of shift handover. So that means there needs to be some attention applied to the process of transitioning from one shift to the next and making sure that the handoff there is adequate and you don't have any risk associated with that handoff. Clause 9.3, specifically 9321, management review inputs. So there are a lot of inputs here. As I mentioned earlier, there are, I believe, 22. So A is cost of poor quality, both internal and external nonconformance. Measuring of process effectiveness, process efficiency, product conformance. E, assessment of manufacturing feasibility for operational changes, new facilities, or new products. So how feasible will it be if we make changes either in operations, facilities, or products? Customer satisfaction, review of performance against maintenance objectives. So here's where you see that total productive maintenance coming in and their objectives being an input. Warranty performance, if there are any warranty items to discuss, if you have a warranty for your products or services. Review of customer scorecards where applicable. If your customer has scorecards, then you need to be reviewing them. If not, then maybe it's your own internal indicators of customer perception. But certainly if there are customer scorecards, you need to bring those in. Potential field failures identified via risk analysis, and then actual field failures and impact on safety or environment. Clause 10, improvement. This is the final act section of the standard. Nothing new in 10.1 above and beyond 9001, but you do see at problem solving 10.2.3 that there needs to be a documented process or processes for problem solving, including defined approaches for various problem types and scale, containment and interim action, root cause analysis, the methodology that you want used, and analysis and results. Implementation of systematic corrective action, including impact on similar products and processes, that piece previously called corrective action impact. Verification of effectiveness of implemented corrective actions. And F, reviewing and updating documented information where necessary, such as the FMEA control plan, standard work, training, etc. 10.2.5 covers warranty management systems. So where warranty is applicable to your products, a warranty system must be implemented. And that needs to include warranty part analysis. How do you go about analyzing those parts under warranty that have failed, and a method for handling those warranty issues where there's no trouble found. And our final subclause here, 10.3, continual improvement. There's a supplement here that says that you have to have a documented process required for continual improvement, including the identification of methods used, objectives, measurement, effectiveness, and documented information. And then manufacturing process improvement action plan, emphasizing reduction in process variation and waste. So those things, those two items need to be a part of your documented process for continual improvement. One last thing is risk assessment or risk analysis, such as an FMEA, fault tree analysis, so on and so forth. So that concludes our review of the significant standard updates according to IATF 16949 2016.
This concludes Module 4 of the QMS Auditor Transition Series.